Hey, welcome to this week's Hired How to Get the Jobs weekly review. We're going to take a little different spin on things today. Today, we're going to talk, it's going to help candidates, but it's also going to be more focused towards recruiting and HR professionals. I do a lot of discussions for candidates and how to get your resumes noticed and things like that. But over the next 15 minutes, I really want to focus on what a proper recruiting consult is and what that means and how it's going to help you hire people faster, hire people that are going to stick around longer, which is really the goal of recruiting. It's not really to hire people. The goal is to disqualify people, because if you disqualify enough bad people and some good ones, the one you're left with is hopefully the best. And then by doing a good recruiting consult, you're going to keep them there longer. And guess what? You're not going to have to backfill them, which is the biggest frustration we all have as recruiters, right? Is just this constant revolving door that we're hiring someone to quit 6 months later. But guess what? Some of the responsibility for people leaving an organization falls on you. So let's talk a little bit about that, and then we'll get to Q&A. But if you're a candidate, if you're looking for a job right now, stick here with me, because this is going to give you some behind the scenes stuff that takes place, or I should say, should be taking place in the right cultures, in the right organization. So it's going to benefit you as well. If you don't know who I am, though, I write a blog called How to Get the Job. I've been helping people get hired for 15 years. I've been a staffing and recruiting manager in a global organization. I've been an executive recruiter where I've worked with C-suite executives. And now I really just, I have a passion for helping people get hired and uncover those skills that they need in order to get the job. Because let's be honest, most of us get to have the skills to keep the job, because once we get a job, most of us keep it unless we move on because of our own reasons. But some of us lack the skills to get the job. So that's really where I focus on. As always, use the comment section. Today, I'm going to have a lot of HR folks on this thing. So feel free to use that comment section to say who you are, where you're from. Use this to network. And afterwards, feel free to follow up with anybody. So let's go into today's topic before we get to your questions. Recruiting consults. Now, if you're not doing this, you're probably doing it wrong, in my opinion. Most of us, a lot of recruiters, will get a requisition, right? The hiring manager will give it to our boss, or we'll be told by the VP of HR or the director of HR, hey, you need to start recruiting, Mr. Recruiter, Mrs. Recruiter, for this role. We get the job description, we post it, and then we start working. That's wrong. If that's what you're doing, you're already doing it wrong. The first thing you should do after you get the job description is send a message to the hiring manager and say, hey, can we sit down? Can we talk for 15 or 30 minutes? Because I wanted to do a recruiting consult with you. And it shouldn't last more than 30 minutes. It might. And it shouldn't last less than 15 minutes. It might. If it lasts less than 15 minutes, you're probably not getting as much value out of this conversation as you could. Or perhaps you've done a lot of work with this hiring manager before, and they already have good expectations. You already have some good trust, and you already know the process. But the recruiting consult is to go over the job description. Obviously, you want to make sure that you know what's in that job description. You want to manage that hiring manager's expectations, as well as figure out what their expectations actually are. And if they're wrong, speak up. You want to know what their preferences are versus their must-haves, because often on the job description it says, we must have this or you must have that. But then after 2 months of not being able to find the must-haves, we then kind of go, well, they're nice to haves. So let's have that conversation on the front end. So that way you don't disqualify people who could be potentially good if the requisition is still open a month from now. Okay. And then lastly, this thing, we have to discuss the team and then the EI traits needed for this person to be successful, as well as the ones that are contrary to what the position offers. So let's get into all that. Let's start unpacking that. Okay. That's what this conversation is going to guide us. So first, when you review the job description, if you're the recruiter, you are going to struggle with this dilemma. You're sitting down with the hiring manager, you're having the recruiting consult, let's go over the job description. And it says, we want to have a master's degree in whatever. You ask him or her, so the person that just left the company, did they have a master's degree? Well, no, but I really want one. Okay. Think about the most successful person you've ever had in this role over your career. Did they have a master's degree? Well, I'm not really sure. Well, so is the master's degree really important? It might be a nice to have, And we can keep it as a requirement, as a knockout question, a screening mechanism. But let's not just automatically disqualify someone if they don't have a master's degree, because perhaps they have a good pedigree. They've been in places, they've done things. The other thing you're going to often happen is if a requisition is open, if a job is open because somebody left, and let's just say that person left because they quit or they found a new job and they've moved on. Now, let's just say they were great in that job. That hiring manager is going to be in love with the idea of the person that left the team. Now, when you leave a team, you've been there for a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. You've been there for a certain amount of time, which means you know the way the process works, you know the company, you know the role. You have done everything in that role, and you're probably a fairly good expert in that role. You need to manage the hiring manager's expectations to realize the person they are in love with who just left is not the person that was hired that joined the company 3 years ago. And often when the hiring manager was promoted into this role or hired into this role and he already had the team, he never saw the growing pains with that candidate who is now leaving the organization. So you need to be sure that you're saying, look, Steve, you really miss Sharon. Sharon's great. She just left. I get it. But do you realize when Sharon came here, she only had 2 years of experience and you're looking for 5? When Sharon came here, she didn't have this or that. She didn't have any SAP experience. She had Oracle. All the things that you love about Sharon, she learned while being in this job. Now, I get, let's try to find Sharon's replacement who's a little better than Sharon when Sharon first showed up. But don't think that there's a candidate out there that's just like Sharon, because the only candidate out there that's like Sharon is Sharon, because she was in the job for the past 3 years and she's the most qualified for it. So you need to get over and you need to help the hiring manager realize and have the expectations that whoever they're going to hire isn't going to be perfect. They're not Sharon. Sharon has already moved on and gone. And when Sharon showed up in the team 3 years ago, Sharon wasn't Sharon. Sharon was Sharon Light. Sharon was a less version of herself. So have that conversation with the hiring manager. Now, expectations are always about the candidate, what to expect. They're about the job description, what's required versus what's needed, but it's also timelines, okay? You need to let them know, look, we're gonna post this job, and we've already posted this job yesterday. We're gonna post this job tonight. Where it goes out to, things like that. You're going to want to go over your screening knockout questions. Okay. Hey, look, I'm going to put these questions as part of the applicant tracking system's knockout questions. I'm also going to be asking these questions. What are some other questions that are important that I should know about? What's the day-to-day job like for this person? I mean, I know what the job description says, but what is the day-to-day like? You need to gather all this information and write it down, take good notes. Then you need to figure out from the hiring manager, who's going to be on the interview panel. When I've talked to and how many people do you want? When I talk to 3 people or 5 people or 6 people, once I get to a certain number, are you going to want to start seeing the resumes? Or perhaps every hiring manager is different. Perhaps before I even talk to somebody, you're going to want to see the resumes of the people I think I should talk to. Don't have your ego involved if you're recruiting. And because you need to realize, and the hiring manager needs to trust you. And if you've never worked with this hiring manager before, talking about these things they never even thought of is going to build trust and build rapport. I've had many hiring managers say, no, Tony, I trust you. We've worked together for a while, or even I just trust you to do your job. If you need me, come to me, but send me candidates, send me 3. Once you phone screen them and you think they're great, send me 5, and then we can figure out who we're going to bring in. And I want these 3 people on my team to talk to them. This is all important because when you're talking to that candidate recruiters on that first phone screen, you can then say, hey, candidate A, I like you. I think we're going to be moving forward with you. I'm not really quite sure yet. Again, however you want to say it. But just so you know, the process moving forward is you're going to have to come in here a couple of times if we select you, because you're going to be meeting with 3 or 4 people on the team. Or you're going to come in here once and you're going to meet with all 3 people at the same time, or whatever. But you need to have all those informational scheduling, logistical ideas out on the forefront, so that way you don't inadvertently tell the candidate something wrong or mismanage their expectations, okay? So you want to be setting the timelines. So recruiting consult, manage hiring managers' expectations. Figure out what their timelines are, okay? Ask their preferences. Now, You also need to have courage if what their preferences aren't realistic, or what their expectations aren't realistic. If you can't tell the hiring manager, and maybe you don't know yet, but maybe you need to have that conversation during this recruiting consult. Go, look, I've never recruited for this role before. I'm not really sure what's available out there. This seems all reasonable. However, if in a day, a week, a month, whatever the right timeline is for you, can I come back to you, say next Thursday, and just let you know where we are, and if I'm having any concerns about these positions or these requirements, and maybe we need to tweak some here or there. Okay, you need to be able to speak up about those things, because if you don't speak up to the hiring manager, they're going to be shocked when you come back 2 weeks later with nothing. But you need to make sure that this is a relationship. You also need to make sure that that hiring manager is going to be available. This is a partnership. You can't just have these candidates dangling on a hook without any information, okay? But and there's a whole way to treat your candidates, which I've talked about before, and maybe I'll get into that again, but not today. This is about you and the hiring manager, this first conversation, okay? So tell the hiring manager, look, you're wrong in this area. You're wrong in these things, or I'm not sure if you're wrong yet. And then the last part of this consult is looking at the team, looking at their strengths, looking at the EI traits needed for this role and the ones that are contrary to the role. I have always done this with a hiring manager who has a team. I will close the door to his office and I'll say, look, Sharon, I guess Sharon can be the candidate and the hiring manager today. Sharon, I don't know, and I don't want to know specifically who are your weak links out there. That's not what I'm asking. You have an IT team though, infrastructure, software, applications, they do all these different things. What are some things on your team you wish you could see them do better? Now, it might not even be on the job description. It might be something totally different. But what are the weak areas of your team? Well, you know what? I got a whole bunch of people who don't know, I don't know, and I'm not an IT person, so forgive me, but they don't know Switch as well, or they don't know bridges or towers, or they don't know this. Even though it's not the part of this person's job, I would love if we could find someone that has some of this in their background. That's huge. It's the equivalent of a baseball team who loses their left fielder. If their left fielder is batting 400 and is leadoff batter and is a righty and all of these skills, when their left fielder goes down, they don't just say, well, we need any outfielder. We need any baseball player. No, we're looking for a left fielder who's a righty, who can hit 350 or better, and blah, 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 blah. There's lots of things with that left fielder, and you should treat your positions on your team the same exact way. There's lots of things that are not on the job description, which is the purpose of this consult, to iron in, to figure out what's important, because then when you have two candidates 30 days from now and you're trying to pick between candidate A and candidate B, these intangible things sometimes play a factor and help bring clarity as to why everyone should move forward in the same direction. Because if you're picking candidate A and the hiring manager's picking candidate B, and you're locked in candidate A and they eventually hire candidate A, hiring manager's going to be against you. And every time that candidate screws up or messes up, see, I told you, Tony, we should have gone with my person. So realize the strengths and weaknesses on your teams, figure that out. And now let's talk about the emotional intelligence traits. We've already talked about the skills needed, right? This is always, we always discuss the skills that somebody needs. Hey, my team out there is a bunch of, they're not very motivated. They're kind of passive people. They do what they're told, but they don't really have any proactiveness to them. Great, we're looking for someone highly motivated. Get it, fantastic. But then you need to ask this person, what's their day-to-day like? Well, this person's day-to-day is going to be pretty boring, pretty routine. Great. Why is that great? Well, it tells me, hiring manager, that I do not want to find somebody that handles stress very well or works well in a stressful environment or thrives in a stressful environment. Well, why is that? Well, your job isn't stressful. If we hire someone who thrives in a stressful environment, they're going to get bored in 6 months and quit. So there's questions that through this recruiting consult, you are going to show that you're not just a recruiter, that you're not just somebody who is hiring people without thinking about it. You're not just filling requisitions. You're a strategic partner in this process. And if you do it well, the hiring manager will trust you and you'll build a relationship with them. And soon on, they will be your advocate inside the organization. Because guess what? That hiring manager is a VP, a director. He's going to be or she's going to be talking to your boss, who's a VP or director. And pretty soon, you're going to go from just being a worker bee to actually being a strategic business partner and working your way up in the organization. So it not only is going to help you and your candidates, it's going to help your career. And the reason why, the last piece here is, look, it's going to fill up requisitions faster because now you and the hiring manager are on the same page. They understand they got to get back to you in a timely manner. They also understand the timelines and things like that and how difficult the market is. You have a better understanding of the role, so when the candidate asks you questions about it, you don't have to say, well, I'm not really sure, let me get back to you. You might have 50% more knowledge, so you can answer 50% more questions on that initial conversation, building more trust and relationships with your candidates. And then lastly, because you dissected this thing from 3 or 4 different angles, you can be more confident that the person you're actually bringing into the organization is going to be a strong fit. So that was our Recruiting Consult talk. We are now going to segue over to our questions and answers. Throughout the course of the weeks, I talk to many clients when it comes to resume writing, interviewing. Today, though, I have client questions, of course, as always, that I've answered or that I've received over this past week that maybe I haven't answered yet. But if you do have any questions, now is the time to start typing them into your comment section. And certainly, if you like this, check out our Facebook page, check out our YouTube channel, and subscribe to our Instagram feed, because on Instagram, I give daily tips like this, like resume writing and interviewing skills, as I'm actually in the middle of rewriting a resume. So let's get to our Q&A now. And let me first go over to the comment section to see if I have any questions over here. Forgive me, it always takes me a minute to read. I'm not that bright. All right. Oh, this might be one. Okay, and this is from a LinkedIn user. Usually I get the person's name, but I use a software to feed the LinkedIn thing to me. Thank you, Mr. Tony. My concern goes to employer recruiters asking too much from job seekers. Example, a company is asking NACE senior corrosion technology certifications, bachelor's degree, yep, for the position of corrosion engineer. My opinion requirements. Yeah, so this is a good example of why that consult is so important. Now, if I'm a new recruiter, LinkedIn user, sorry, I don't know your name. Let's see if I can find it on a different source. I always like asking people's names, but okay, sorry. Oh, maybe that's Wilfred. If this is you, Wilfred, if it's not, apologize. But this happens all the time because that person who's recruiting isn't the subject matter expert. Remember, we as recruiters got to recruit every position. We're not subject matter experts, right? If we're not subject matter experts, we're taking the hiring manager's word for things. Now, this is why when you sit down and go over that job description, you need to be saying, hey, what's important, what's required, what's nice to have. Often, there might be an internal candidate that has all of these skills that if they could find someone externally with those same skills, they're going to hire that external person or at least have someone to compare the internal person to. That's sometimes why you do this as a recruiting team, because Joe is getting ready for promotion. But before we promote Joe, we want to make sure someone on the outside doesn't have the same skills as Joe. And then we can justify to Joe why either A, we're not moving forward with him in the promotion, or B, why we're promoting Joe and great job. Sometimes there's a bigger plan for this position that you don't even know about, Wilfred. Sometimes this position is we're hiring Wilfred to be in this role for a year, but we expect Wilfred to be a senior manager or whatever in 2 years. And it would save us a lot of money if Wilfred didn't need these extra certs or have to pay, or if we have to pay for these extra certs. Sometimes it's just about the piece of paper, and because you went through that experience, we have more trust that you're going to be able to handle the challenges that come here. That's so true with bachelor's degree and master's degree. Very often, people I work with will say, we require a bachelor's. Why? Well, we really don't care about the bachelor's, but just knowing that you completed 4 years of college says something about your discipline level. Not knowing more about this certification, that's kind of where I think some of that might lie. But also, it's a good opportunity for you to realize when you see that in the job description, and if you get a phone call about it, you might be having to educate the recruiter on some things on that role, because you and your experience are going to be like, look, in my experience, these few certs aren't as relevant as this one over here. Oh, really? You know, bottom line, when you're talking to that phone screener, recruiter, you have a great opportunity to influence the way they feel about you, not just because you're a strong candidate, but because you're a humble candidate that can actually teach them, and you're taking them under your wing and helping them a little bit understand the requisition. Because often a recruiter does not really understand the job they are recruiting for. They are just trying to fill the requisition with somebody that's going to do the job. And I hope they're thinking about doing the job well, but it doesn't always happen. So thank you, Wilfred or LinkedIn user, for that question. All right, I got a text message. Text message today from a client asking me how I did on my hashtag 30 for 30. If you didn't know, month of September, today is the 30th day of the month. I had a goal of doing 30 free recruiting consults over the course of the month of September. I did 32. So we hit the 30 for 30 goal, and 32 people are now on their ways to having stronger resumes because of our conversation. Going into October, I don't know what the promo is going to be, but if you know anybody looking for some resume advice, interviewing skill advice, connect them with me so I can connect them and help them get plugged in. All right, next question I got was Mike in Houston. Should a LinkedIn profile be the same as a resume? If not, how are they different? So this is an interesting question that I get a lot. LinkedIn profiles and resumes should have similar information, but be different. LinkedIn, you can show your humanity a little more. You can use I and me. It's not as formal. But you can also, on your LinkedIn profile, it should complement your resume. It should be the mirror image on dates, okay? If you use months on your resume, months and year formatting on resumes, use month and year formatting on LinkedIn. If you only use year formatting on LinkedIn, I'm going to assume you're lying to me on the resume. You hear me? If your resume format says May of 17 to June of 20, and your LinkedIn profile says 17 to 20, I am going to assume you're lying to me on your resume. Because why wouldn't you put it on your LinkedIn profile if it's true on your resume? The only reason why you wouldn't have the same information on dates on your LinkedIn profile is because you're trying to cover something up, or you're lazy. You didn't want to type in month and the year on LinkedIn. So don't make me assume you're lying, and don't make me assume you're lazy. Mirror them both. And I'm a big fan of the month and the year on the resume anyway, because if you are somewhere from 19 to 20, 2019 to 2020, I don't know if it was December of 19 to January of 2020, which is just 2 months, or if it was January of 2019 to December of 2020, which is 2 full years. Big difference. Put the months there. But on your LinkedIn profile, you want to have good headers. You want to have things that are attention grabbers. Highlight your skills. You want to have focus, just like in your resume. You want to have focus on your LinkedIn profile. You don't want your LinkedIn profile to be a whole bunch of ambiguous terms and words that when I, as a recruiter, look at it, go, what the hell is this person good at? I know they do a lot of stuff, but are they good at anything? Because I don't want to hire a jack of all trades. I want to hire someone that's specialized in this position, because that means they're going to be good in this position. So happy to talk more about it with you. If you do have a LinkedIn profile question, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to look at your LinkedIn profile and give you some of my thoughts. I'm not a LinkedIn, I do LinkedIn profile writing to help enhance those profiles, but in no way do I consider myself an expert on LinkedIn profiles as I do an expert on resume writing. Certainly can help you though. All right, any more live questions today yet? Nope, no more live questions yet, but feel free again to ask anything you want to ask. Ken in Houston, I'm in my early 50s. I've been laid off after being with the same company for 30 years. I've never had to apply for a job. Now, how do I increase my resume hits? Ken, you need to watch the video from last week. The 15-minute opening is all about how to win at cold calling your resume. Ultimately, you need to leverage your network. You need to build a network where you don't have one. And then if you don't know how to do those two things, you need to make sure that you're using LinkedIn effectively, which again, I've done the whole 15 minutes last week. I don't necessarily want to go into 15 minutes of it right now, but anyone who is having a struggle, doesn't matter if you've been with the same company for 30 years or 3 years. If you're struggling to get people to call you back, watch that video from last week on the YouTube channel. Why not? I'll throw up the quick plug right there. Go check out the YouTube channel and make sure you see last week's video of Hired How to Get the Jobs Weekly Review. One thing I will say though to Ken is if you are struggling to get callbacks and you've been with the same company for 30 years, I'm guessing you're not 18 years old. I'm guessing you could be 60 years old. Not a big deal. Might be 50 years old. Not a big deal. Again, I don't think your ageism isn't as important as people think, but it does matter what you're applying to. I will say this probably every video I do like this. If you're applying to jobs that someone who's 20 years old can do, then you're not going to get the job if you have 30 years of experience. I'm not going to assume you're old. I'm going to assume you're too expensive. So make sure in the cover letter you're addressing the gaps and the concerns that I think you're going to naturally have. And if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to analyze your background because you're too close to it, let me do it. Send it to me and I'll say, look, here's my questions. If you were applying to this job, here's the 5 questions I'd have before I even called you. And then you can say, okay, now I understand what you mean. And then you can write a cover letter to address those 5 questions when you apply to jobs, which will increase your resume hits. Okay, now let's go to Jessica from Australia. I interviewed recently with a company. I did not get the job because I'm not a certified engineer. The role has come back on the job boards, but now is no longer requiring an engineering cert. Should I rewrite my resume or a cover letter to apply, or should I just send the same one? Well, here's the truth. They already have your resume, right? There's going to be some struggle here for me because there's 2 things. You shouldn't rewrite the resume. The job's the same, just requires 1 less cert from what I understand. So I would say apply. And I don't know Australia as well as other countries, but just apply with the same resume. But I would update the cover letter. I would put in my cover letter, hey, thanks so much for your consideration. Excited about potential opportunity at company name, position name, period. Recently reviewing your job boards, I see you've changed this job position to no longer require the certification. I feel like I'm a strong fit, blah, 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 blah. That'll show that you're really excited about the company and you're continuing to follow them. And now, if you've interviewed with them, then you can do this all too. But in my mind, I really feel that if you were the right fit, they wouldn't repost the job with lower requirements. Maybe they would, but they would still probably call you up, I would think, and say, hey, Jessica, we just reposted this job, or we're going to tomorrow. We're removing the requirement of a so-and-so certified engineer. We'd love for you to reapply because we think you're a strong fit, or we were excited to talk to you. That makes perfect sense. But if they never told you, they never called you back, my gut just says, Jessica, you're not really considered for the job, because I feel like you were the low-hanging fruit. You were someone that they've already read the resume. Now, maybe they just, applicant tracking system moved on and shed you out the other side. So there's lots of angles here, but if you talk to someone over there, my gut is that you might not be the right fit for their organization, and it might come back to something that's not even part of that job description. Might have to come back to that recruiting console conversation talked about at the front of this half hour, which was, maybe there's skills that you displayed that are not the right skills for that role or that culture. All right, and last question, unless I get a live one, if I get live ones, I always come back to it. Kenneth, good luck. I am applying. Sorry, yes, Kenneth is a crane operator. Again, I certainly crane operator, international crane operator, Nigeria. Seems like a local. If you're looking for a crane operator, feel free to click on Kenneth's profile. But again, if anyone has the same kind of background or a background they're looking to get hired, do exactly what Kenneth did. Type your stuff in there. All right, last question for the day is Monica. Monica in Houston, after the interview, I didn't get the person I spoke with's email address. Should I still try to follow up with them? Yes, yes, yes. When we conclude an interview with anybody, the very last thing we say is, this is great, thanks so much. When should I be expecting to hear from you? When will you be making a decision? What are the next steps? You say things like that, showing your interest, but also giving you permission to follow up. They will then tell you, next Thursday, we should know something. Great. When you get home the next morning, you write them an email. And you write them an email specifically about what they now talk to you about. You don't just give them a general, thanks so much for your time yesterday, it was great. No, something specific you guys discussed, put in that email. And if you don't have their email address, you certainly should have the recruiter's email address who set the whole thing up to begin with, because there's been some sort of communication from the organization to you, and I doubt it was just over LinkedIn. Maybe it was. And if it is over LinkedIn, then chances are you can go click on the recruiter's contact information and get their email address. So I would email, if you don't have the email address of the person and you don't know the nomenclature, or maybe their name is Tony, but it might be A.Martin, Anthony.Martin, or it might be T.Martin, or it might be Tony. You don't quite know it. I would email the recruiter, say, thanks so much, so-and-so, for setting me up to meet with this individual. I had a really great conversation. Would you mind forwarding the below email to her, to him, as I don't have their email address? That will show the recruiter how much you care about this role. It'll show them how much you respect them and how you're allowing them to make that connection. Bottom line, it's just building bridges everywhere. If you do have the email address of the individual, here's something key that most people don't tell you or you don't think about. On every email you send to somebody who interviewed you, and again, you should send an email to everybody who interviewed you, CC the recruiter on all of those emails. Not because you're trying to overwhelm them, but you want the recruiter to see that you wrote a home run email, or at least a non-generic, a conversation-specific email to each person in that value chain. Because I've always said this, the recruiter has the least amount of authority in the hiring process, but they have the most amount of power and influence. They are the ones talking to every candidate. At the end of the day, a month from now, they're going to sit down with the hiring manager and they're going to say, A or B? Which one do you think, hiring manager? And hiring manager can go, I think B. What do you think, recruiter? And the recruiter's going to go, well, let's think. Candidate A, candidate A, he actually emailed every single one of you guys, all 7 of you guys, with a personalized email. And he CC'd me on it. I don't know. I mean, maybe candidate B is the right way to go, but I just feel like candidate A really cares about people and kind of understands us. Again, maybe it doesn't do anything, but it gives you a better in with that recruiter who's going to maybe be that final decision maker after that consult on day 1 to the hiring consult on the last day to help your application get over the edge. I hope all that helps. I hope everyone is doing well. As always, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Follow me on Facebook if you like this sort of stuff. If this is just too long, if 30 minutes is just painful to sit through, I get it. You're like a lot of people I know. Go over to Instagram, hired_how-to-get-the-job. Follow me on Instagram, give daily tips there. And as always, if you know anybody in your network who's looking for a job, who is in the middle of trying to revamp their resume, or if you're in a company that's struggling to keep people, let's talk. Let me show you how to get the job hired, or let me show you how to get the job. Have a good one. I'll see you next time. Bye.